Hey mate, have you been told that your hip flexors are weak and you need to strengthen them? Well, I'm going to show you a few great ways to do that in this video and also go into why your hip flexors may not actually be weak in the first place. Let's check it out. So before we actually start going into strengthening your hip flexors, you need to know why you need to strengthen them in the first place. And why saying that your hip flexors are weak isn't exactly what's going on here. So you've probably gone around the internet and searched for something called anterior pelvic tilt, okay? So a lot of the time, what people do, when we've got our hips here, this is your neutral space with your hips. So they're kind of like, imagine this is a bit more of a straight line. This is posterior tilt, where you're tucking your bum under, and then the other way is anterior pelvic tilt, where basically what you're doing is you're dumping into the floor and your hip flexors are really jacked up, your butt's not really working, your tummy's not working, and your back's really working hard, okay? Saying that these two are weak and that these two are really strong is not exactly the right answer for it. What's happening, I would say, is all four of these muscles, these areas, are just dysfunctional, okay? So it's not because that your hip flexors are so strong that they're pulling you into there. It's just that your hips are in a position where these two things are more activated and these two are less activated, okay? A good way to think about it is, if you look at my tummy, when it's in neutral, it's in a bit of a middle ground, okay? So when I pelvic tilt, I'm stretching this muscle, and when I do the opposite of it, I'm shortening that muscle. Now, your muscle can be strong and weak when it's overly stretched and when it's overly shortened, okay? The best way for a muscle to do its job the way it wants to is to be somewhere in the middle, okay? If it's really stretched, it's going to find it a real hard time activating. When it's really compressed like this, it's going to find it a real hard time relaxing, okay? So what can happen with your hips, they shorten, they get really tight, and they feel weak because they're just constantly they're constantly switched on, and they're just getting overworked. Now, sure, I can totally understand that if you work your hip flexors, build a bit more strength, build a bit more capacity, build a bit more endurance, your hip flexors are going to be able to handle this position a lot more. In other words, handle staying switched on for a lot longer. But it's not going to be fixing the underlying issue. So the underlying issue is why your hip flexors are feeling tight or feeling like they're weak is simply because they're overworked in this position. Whereas if we bring them into a more neutral position, the position that your hip flexors are really designed to be in, you won't have to worry about building the capacity in them because we're not overworking them. That's why the first exercise that we're going to go into is actually teaching you to getting out of this position and into a more neutral position. And that way we can put them in a position where they're not overly stretched like your stomach, and they're not overly contracted, and somewhere in the middle. Every muscle that's somewhere in the middle, not overly stretched and overly contracted, works the best. Okay, so for this first one, these ones are called just pelvic tilts. So super easy to implement. You can do this anywhere. But if you're having trouble with your pelvis and pelvic tilting and stuff like this, you may actually find this super hard. So for this one, all you need to do is lie down on your back, and you're going to bend your knees to start off with, because it's a lot easier to tilt your pelvis in and out with your knees bent rather than when your legs are far away like this, okay? So what you're going to do is have your hands on your hips, both sides here, and you can actually use your hands to help with tilting your pelvis into posterior tilt and anterior tilt. So in other words, anterior tilt is just with that super arch here, and posterior tilt is when you're tucking your bum under, okay? So what you're going to do is have your hands on here, both feet on the floor like that, and you're going to use your hips, okay? So going into that overarching position, and then just work on tucking that under. And what you'll find when you're tucking under is that your abs are you actually find that they're working to tuck it under, okay?
So tuck it under your abs, and your glutes seem to switch on more, stretches out your back. And then when you go in here, they kind of stretch out, and then you bunch up your back a little bit more. So what you're going to do here is just going to practice going in and out of these, doing just a couple reps of these. And if you find it really hard, this is what it might look like for you. You might be starting here, and then it might just be a little bit of a tilt, if you can even see that. Start with those little tilts, and then just do the reps until you can slowly get more and more. Just when you think you can't get any more, if you keep doing these reps, you'll be able to really tuck under, okay? Like I said, this is gonna feel a lot harder for some than others, but what you wanna do is go a big arch and then tuck under. Try to squeeze your butt a little bit. That'll help you tuck under also too.
Okay, so the exercise before would have prepped you for the next one, because the next one's really going to challenge your ability to keep your hips tucked under so that you can strengthen your hip flexors. Okay, so remember, the whole idea is to strengthen your hip flexors in a neutral position, okay? That way we're getting all the right muscles working at the same time. We're also getting a bit of core working in this exercise too. So the way we're going to do this is you grab one of these bands, okay? And you're going to wrap them around your forefoot, around here, and then you're going to sit on your butt. So before you do this exercise, you could do a few of those pelvic tilts, right? So what we want to do is make sure we get our back onto the floor like that, and then we're ready to go, okay? This one's really going to burn in the front of the hip flexors, and if you feel really weak with these are going to be super hard. So I would start off with quite a light band for this one to begin with, okay? So you're starting off with your hips flexed like this, and what you're going to do is going to bend one knee up and then shoot one leg the other way. So you're kind of splitting yourself in half, okay? You'll find this, surprisingly, it's going to be working your core here. So you can brace and like holding onto the floor like this, and what you're going to do is lift this leg up while simultaneously kicking the other leg forward, like pointing your toe like so, okay? And it's like a bicycle, so you're going left to right, like so. Pause for a bit, squeezing, and you want to make sure that you're not arching your back you're not arching your back at all on this one. So you want to make sure you're tucking under, so pushing all the way there, holding for a second, and then going back like that. So what I would recommend is just gripping on the floor and going alternately, like a bicycle, okay? What you'll find is this, after a while, you'll start to feel a good burn, okay? So remember to flex your toes towards your nose, so you keep that band on your foot, and you'll find that this is a great way to build up more capacity, more endurance in your hip flexors, and to a degree strengthening them. Okay, so now that we've got your hip flexors nice and activated, your core is going to be working because we've got your pelvis in a more neutral position. Now we're ready to integrate it into something a bit more meaningful to your body. That way it'll remember to keep your body in a more neutral position. Okay, so a great way to do that is by teaching it to do a squat in a neutral position. This way you're going to be still strengthening your hip flexors and using them, but by also integrating into your squat and strengthening your whole body at the same time. So the way we do this is we use a plate in front of us while we're doing a squat. And the reason why this works is because what happens is when we're doing a normal squat, it's going to be quite easy to slip into that position, the extension position. But if we hold this out, our body wants to do this, okay? So by holding out the plate here, it's going to make us use our core a lot more, because if we drop into that position there, we're going to be quite weak, okay? So it's going to be a bit more of a self-limiting exercise, okay? So the way we do this is we're going to hold the plate out front like that. We're going to squeeze our butt, but remember those pelvic tilts, by tucking under a bit, squeezing our bum, shoulder width with our feet, and we're just going to slowly descend into our squat, going as tall as we can, and then firing back up at the top. What we want to make sure when we're going to do this squat is that we're not folding with our knees, because if our knees fold in, we've got a tendency to go into that pelvic tilt, okay? So the way we want to do that is we want to hold it out here just so you can see. We're going to drive those knees out and then slowly sit down into the squat, drive out, and then go all the way up, okay? And just remember, you don't have to just keep strengthening your hip flexors. You have to fix where your pelvic alignment. If you get the pelvic alignment right, every muscle is going to work perfectly. Any kind of squat you do or hip flexor marching or any kind of exercise is going to strengthen the right muscles, okay? It's not, you're not going to fix your hip flexors just by focusing on just exercising the hips. It's all about getting those hips in the right alignment. If you get that down first, you're really heading in the right direction. All you need to do is just make sure you do some real easy exercise to help you get your head around getting your pelvis into neutral. Throw in an activation exercise like I did with the psoas march, and then integrate it into your squat with the squat with core activation. If you do those 3 exercises before you do a heavy day of squats, you're definitely gonna get a lot more glute activation. I can almost guarantee you that your hips are gonna feel a lot better in the long run if you keep doing it. So thanks so much for watching. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up so more people who've got issues with the hip flexors can see this video. Also make sure to subscribe down below. I've also got a very good present for you. So if you are going in and out of the gym and you keep getting tight hip flexors, you get them released and then you go back to the gym and they keep getting tight all over again, or you get in pain again, I've got a special guide to getting over those injuries and issues and getting you back into the gym as fast as possible. This is called the 7 lifts to bulletproof your body after injury. I'm going to drop a link down below. Please make sure to give it a click. This is me done for today. My name's Adam, and remember, I help you return to the gym and stay there.